for joining us for the Springfield Business and Economic Review. I am your host, Sarah Wolin with the Greater Springfield Chamber of Commerce. Today we have two great guests with us from the University of Illinois at Springfield to share with us results of a recent survey and recent index about the economic climate here in our community. Thank you guys both for joining us.
You're welcome.
Now I know, Richard, you're involved with the Survey Research Office. Tell me a little bit about what you do on campus.
As you said, I'm in the Survey Research Office. I direct the Survey Research Office. We're located in the Center for State Policy and Leadership, and we do a lot of surveys for government agencies and nonprofit organizations. That's our specialty. We do mail-out surveys, and a lot of times we have a web-based format, much as the case with the Sangamon County Business Economic Outlook Survey. We also do a lot of telephone surveys.
All right, well, great. And Patty, teacher, professor.
Yes.
Make sure the students have knowledge. Tell us a little bit about what you do out at UIS.
Well, I'm an associate professor in the economics department, and I'm also a research associate in the Center for State Policy and Leadership.
So multiple hats are worn.
Yeah, two hats there. So
well, that's great. Well, as I mentioned, we had two economic reports that have just come out. The first of which was the Springfield Economic Index, the SEI. Tell me a little bit about what the SEI is. Well,
the SEI is a leading economic indicator of the local economy, Springfield area economy, and it sort of tells us where we're at in the business cycle, 3 months from now, a year from now, and so on. And it uses historical data, employment data at the local level, and then national business indicator data.
All right, well, great. And then we also had a survey that came out. Tell us a little bit about what that is.
Every 6 months, we started a year ago, and every 6 months we sample a group of employers who have 10 or more employees in Sangamon County. They're both nonprofits and businesses, and we ask a series of questions about their perceptions of what they expect to happen in the overall economy and various aspects of it, as well as what they expect to happen in their firm over the next 12 months. And as I said, we do it every 6 months, so this was our third survey we just completed.
Great. And yours comes out quarterly, correct?
Yeah, ours comes out quarterly. And we also started about a year ago working with the Chamber and the Institute for Government Affairs at the University of Illinois. So it's kind of a three-way partnership between UIS, U of I, and you guys, the
Chamber.
Chamber.
It can't happen without partners.
No,
nothing can in life.
Right.
It's been a great partnership
It
so
really
far,
has.
so.
It really has. Well, Patty, you mentioned one thing. You mentioned leading indicators. What is a leading indicator? What does that mean?
Well, it's kind of like at a stop sign, the yellow light is an indicator that the red light's coming. Well, that's the same kind of thing. This takes data and looks from the past to look ahead and say, well, given what's happened, where are we going to be in the business cycle? And that just means, are we going to have above normal activity or below normal activity, and how far above or below?
And the business cycle, that leads me to believe that things can go up and down. Business is not always good.
No, and what we find is when you look at economies over time, they grow, but as you said, there's downturns or recessions and upturns, and that's kind of what we're trying to describe. We have this long-term growth trend, and then where we are in the business cycle. Okay. Yeah, it always is not on a steady path.
Right.
That would be too easy.
Be evolving. It's always evolving.
You wouldn't have anything to study.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Now tell me a little bit then about who's filling out this survey that you're doing, because I know it's focused here on our local economy.
Right.
So what types of businesses are filling that out?
We send them to all sectors. The only sectors that we have taken out of the survey are public entity sectors.
Okay.
And also the educational sector doesn't have as much representation because much of it is public sector in orientation. So basically it's all the private sectors and then also the nonprofits. Now that would include membership associations and that sort of thing. We decided to leave those in because we have a lot of them in the Springfield area.
Lots of association
that's
of
right.
X.
Exactly. And they have to be located in Sangamon County, so it is a local one. And as I mentioned earlier, right now we focused on those that have 10 or more employees. So every survey we actually send out to, if a firm has 50 or more, they'll get a survey every time.
Okay.
But because there are more employers with employment from 10 to 49, we sample every time, and basically we do about half of them every time. So about 900 and some go out, and about 200 right now. For this one, over 210 came back.
Which is enough to be representational?
Yeah, it's about plus or minus 6%, 6.5% for any particular proportion we have. And we do look at that. We look at, by sector, are we representative of those we sent out? And in the first 3 surveys, we're pretty representative in terms of the returns we get compared to those that were sent out.
What are some of the questions that you guys are asking, or what are some of the results you got back from those?
Every time we have a series of items, and the question is basically, the response categories are the same. We said, in the next 12 months, do you expect this, whatever it is, to increase quite a bit, increase a little, stay about the same, decrease a little, or decrease quite a bit? And we do that for the Sangamon County economy as a whole. Then we have various aspects of it. We also ask the same questions for 12 sectors of the Sangamon County economy. And then we do the same for, well, what about your firm overall? And then for various aspects of their firm, such as capital investment, employment, and various other kinds of things.
So they are demonstrating then what they feel about the economy here, and also what they feel about their business or industry.
Their own business and their own firm, correct.
All right, great. What were some of the results you heard
Well,
this time?
In the most recent survey, and it probably won't be surprising given the national recession that we're in currently, the outlook is fairly pessimistic, I could say. When we asked about what do you expect for the Sangamon County economy as a whole, 2/3 expect some kind of decline in the next 12 months. But most of that, 58%, said a little, 12% said a lot. So it could be worse.
I'll take a little over a lot.
25% expected stability, and 7% said it was going to increase. And nobody said increase a lot.
Hey, but there are 7% for increase.
There
I'll
are
take
7%.
That. I'll take
Now,
it.
from these responses, we develop what we call an intensity index score. Now, that's sounds much more complicated than it is. Okay. What we do is we score these responses as -100 if somebody says decline quite a bit, -50 decline a little, 0 for stability, and then increases are +50 and +100. So if we had an average, an index score, which is the average of this, if we had an index score that was -100, it would mean everybody says the economy is going to decline quite a bit. +100 means everybody thinks it's going to increase quite a bit, and 0 means everybody says it's going to be stable, or they equally balance out on each side. So the most recent index number was -36. And that was somewhat more pessimistic than 6 months ago. It was -29, and a year ago it was -22. So kind of translating it into the percent that said decrease, because that's a little bit kind of, you can handle that more in terms of what does that mean. 54% a year ago said the economy was going to decrease. Then it went to 58% in September, and our most recent, as I said, was 2/3.
Okay. All right. So they're saying it's not so good, but it could be worse.
Well, and in terms of saying it could be worse. Now, well, actually, let me talk about the firm, what they said about their firm. When we ask about their firm, in every survey we've done, each of the 3, they're more positive about their firm than they are for the economy as a whole. Perhaps because they know more about their firm in terms of hands-on experience versus how do you know about the economy? Well, probably what you hear in the media and that sort of thing. Or what you hear about the national economy or whatever.
It seems so massive.
Right. But when we ask about their own firm, it's somewhat negative, but not as much as the economy as a whole. 42% expect some kind of decrease, but most of that is a little rather than a lot. A little over a third, 35% said stability, and just under a quarter said it's going to stay about we're going to have an increase. But most of that is a little rather than quite a bit. So that index number was -12 compared to -36 for the economy as a whole. But we do have declines that we see over the past year, but much over much narrower range. A year ago here, we were slightly positive, +7, then it went to -6 6 months ago, and now it's at -12. But then you kind of were leading me into another question we asked, and I wanted to mention the firm, because that is one of these questions we ask every time. We also have a section that just has a few questions where we come up with new questions in every survey. And this most current one, we said, compared to the national economy, how do you think the local economy is doing currently? And then we asked the same thing for their firm's sector. How is that sector performing locally versus nationally? And here, we had we had pretty negative, somewhat negative results, that we've been talking about till now. But I guess we could say, well, if they're negative here, I mean, they're much more positive when they view it in contrast to the national economy. For instance, 3/4 think the Sangamon County economy currently is better than the national economy.
That's
now,
great.
most of those are saying somewhat better, but nonetheless,
I'll take better.
3/4 are saying better. 20%, 1 in 5 say the same. Only 5% say we are worse than the national economy. And in terms of how their firm's sector is performing locally versus nationally, we still have more positive than negative results here. 47% said better locally, 42% said about the same, and only about 1 out of 10 said their firm's sector is performing worse locally than it is nationally.
Well, that speaks very highly then about the Springfield
Yes,
Sangamon
it
County
does,
community.
particularly in the national environment. It speaks much more positively.
So although it's challenging here, it's much more challenging in
elsewhere,
other
right.
areas, according
Yes.
to the thoughts
According
and beliefs.
to the perceptions and attitudes of the local business people
And
and
again,
nonprofit CEOs.
This is their opinion that they're expressing
That's right.
here.
Unlike Patty's,
Right.
the index Patty talked about, ours is subjective. It's people's opinions. They're not based on objective, economic indicators. Now, what we'd hope to do once we have a few more surveys, and then we look at your index, and then we look at how the economy's actually performed, is start kind of comparing expectations to then what actually has happened. We're not quite to that.
We're not there
stage yet.
We will
but we're
be.
getting there.
We
That's
will
right.
be.
Yeah.
So, Patty, based on what is actually happening with your
Okay.
statistics, tell us a little bit about what you found.
All right. Well, as I said, and Dick had pointed out, it's based on actual economic data, historical data, and it takes national and regional indexes. For example, the Chicago Fed National Economic Activity Index, and then the Chicago Manufacturing Index. It uses those, and then it takes local employment levels, non-farm employment levels, and tries to figure out what's going to happen in the future, predict what's going to happen in the future. And if the index is at 100, that means that we're at the normal average level of economic activity. It's above 100, where we should predict to be above normal economic activity, and below 100, like 93 or whatever, we're below economic activity. The index for December was 110, which says we're slightly above economic activity. And then it's expected to get a little lower, 106, 109, still above economic activity. And a year ago, the index was slightly higher. So we have seen it go down, but still not predicting us to be in, any kind of big drop in recession. And the index was much lower in say 2001, when we were in a local recession as well as national recession.
So again, 100 means we're at our growth level where we should be.
Right.
And we're at 110.
Right.
So this is a good thing.
Yeah, it really is demonstrating that the Springfield economy, so far we don't see the downward trend that is happening in the national economy or in the other parts, like the Chicago similar index. They are below their average.
I was just going to ask that.
Yeah.
How, if Springfield's at 110 against our growth rate, how does that play against other MSAs in our community, in our state, or Chicago as an example?
Yeah, when we compare other MSA, their index, so it's a measure of how they're doing relative to their economy, not Springfield economies versus them, but most of the MSAs are either a little bit below their average or a little bit above. Like we're probably the highest above at 110. and Chicago is way down. Like I think theirs was 85 or something.
Yeah.
So they've obviously had more job loss and more hit harder with the manufacturing and housing down and construction downturn than we have in
here.
Springfield. At least that's what this is indicating. We still don't know. I mean, we've been in a 16th month recession nationally since November of 07. And it can be pessimistic. We can still say, well, it could hit us after if the national recession gets worse. It could still affect us. Certainly, as I said, our data is historical, and we haven't seen such a bad recession at the national level. So we really don't know for sure what could happen in Springfield. On the positive side, the president's and the national stimulus package is expected to bring 145,000 jobs or retained or new jobs to the state of Illinois. So it's we've got positive
hope that would help.
Yeah, we've got positive and negative forces, and but I think the fact that at least currently, based on historical data, we're above our growth is a good thing, and it's true for Illinois and Springfield that the job losses in Illinois haven't been as high as they have been nationally.
Yeah, and that really is true. I know the recent unemployment data came out, and our increase in unemployment was smaller than any other community's increase across the state except for Bloomington.
Yeah.
So I mean, we really are weathering it.
Yes,
here.
it seems.
We're really working well.
Yes.
Now you also
and that's not to make people that have lost their job or have problems with their housing or their retirement funds or whatever, because certainly
it's not perfect. We recognize that.
Certainly we know that there's hurt for some people even in Springfield, but yes, I think you're right that we have weathered it better than some other areas.
And now you can also project out towards the future with this. You
right.
look out a couple of months. Tell us a little about that.
Well, as I said, we're at 110 now, but like in April, it's expected to be like a little bit lower, 106. But then a year from now, so this would be next December,
December of 09.
Yes.
Okay.
The index is at predicted to be 109. I mean, I'm sorry, 113. So that's
even higher
than
right
110.
now.
But more importantly, it's higher than what was predicted in December of 08, which we know we had slower growth than in terms of the holiday season and what. So the economy is going to be at 113 last December. It was at 107. So
we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. So
that's what we hope.
That is. I mean, it's going to pick up again after the second quarter of 09 is basically what is predicted, and not huge increases, but still above normal, normal growth, which is what it's indicating.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I know in the survey that we did, we also look at not just how do you feel about the economy, but what are some of the challenges in your that you're facing as a business owner. Can you tell us a little about those?
Sure. Every time, as you mentioned, we say, what are the biggest challenges as you look over the next 12 months? And we offer a series, I think there's about 8 or 9 categories, and then they can answer other. But the big result for this time was the increase in consumer confidence in spending as a concern. That is now by far the biggest concern of local business people and nonprofit CEOs. 63% of them, marked that category. And that was up from, a year ago it was 34%, then it went to 42, and then it went to 63. So it's kind of gone from, a concern, but kind of in the middle of the pack, or kind of towards the top of the middle, and all of a sudden it's now the number one. Now, on the other hand, the biggest...
That is so consistent with national indicators that the Consumer's Confidence Index that came out this month is the lowest it's ever been.
So again, consumer confidence is What is consumer confidence?
They literally interview, similar to a survey that Dick's office does, is they survey consumers and asking them what they expect to happen in the economy. Do you expect
How do you feel?
Yeah,
Right.
you expect
Are you
to
ready to
spend
spend?
more? Yeah.
Are you ready
Sure.
to spend?
How's your summer vacation? What are your vacation plans? No,
And
but
that
yeah,
confidence translates into spending that, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. It's shown to be a good indicator of what consumers are going to do in terms of spending.
So it had a huge increase.
That's right. In
as
terms
a
of
concern.
business, in terms of a concern, these business people are really concerned about consumer spending. That's what we found. Now, just in terms of how times change, and sometimes our short memory, 6 months ago, what was the number one concern? Well, that was spread out a little bit more, but the number one then was energy prices, you know? But all of a sudden, you know, that actually had the biggest change, and
Yeah.
it was one of a decline. It went from, you know, it was 24% recently, and it had been 53% and
Wow.
46% a year ago. So we went from about half, and that concern was cut in half in 6 months. It just shows you
Yeah.
the changing environment and how business attitudes and concerns react to that.
Yeah.
What are some of the other challenges that people noted in the survey?
Some of the other ones, and let me kind of look at my list here. The other two, or the next one at almost 40%, employee compensation and benefits, okay, including healthcare costs,
I was
for
going to say,
instance.
health insurance is
Yeah.
a big one, I know, in there.
About a third, 32%, said government regulations and taxes, and also various aspects of public policy. And then about a quarter said state government finances, and then energy prices did come in at 24%. About 1 in 5 said commodity prices and competition within the United States, and then inflation. And so those were, but again, that 63% figure is really kind of a 63 and then to
Yeah.
38. So consumer
It's
confidence
huge.
is the biggest one.
That's
Right.
great. And then I know that another thing that is looked at is the different sectors of
Right,
the economy
right.
and how they're performing.
We
Tell
asked-
us a little
yes.
about that.
We ask about expectations for 12 different sectors, and most of our index scores are negative in the most current survey, except for 2 sectors, and that's medical and healthcare are positive, and then also education. And actually, in each of our surveys, medical and healthcare has been positive and has been the most positive sector in terms of outlook in each of our 3 surveys. Education has been positive generally, but less so. And then, as I said, everything else is negative. The one that really took a hit in terms of outlook this time was manufacturing.
Yeah.
It came in at minus 54 as an index, and that had gone from minus 30 to minus 54.
Which makes sense when you think
Right.
of some of the challenges we're having with the manufacturing
Exactly.
sector, locally and nationally.
Sure.
So, but you mentioned healthcare and medical as being so high. I mean, I guess that would be related to the strong healthcare community we have, and they're continuing.
That's
to
true, and I
thrive.
think the continuing demand for healthcare services, you know, given the demographics of the population. I mean, I would think, Patty, you may know
No,
more.
I think that's true, that there'll be continuing demand, and also, you know, the fact that it's been on the minds of both in our state government and the federal government to broaden access to care. So that certainly will increase demand and help.
Well, and it definitely helps our local economy. That is such an important part of our economy.
Yes.
As being a sector that continues to grow, it's important, I think, to us to recognize
Sure,
that.
and with the district we have here, and
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
that's,
There's definitely a
Yeah.
lot going on there with that. Any other trends that you've seen either in this, Dick, either in this one or in the multiple surveys we've done that you'd like to share?
Well, I think it's kind of, as I mentioned this before, but it's probably worth mentioning again, is that when we look at the outlook, people are more positive about their own firm than they are the economy as a whole. And actually, one other piece that I didn't mention, if we kind of match up where their sector with their expectations for the various sectors, you find that when you look at expectations for their own sector locally, it's right in between. So the more close you get to home for these people, the more positive they come, or in some cases, the less negative, I suppose you could say. Now, on the other hand, when we asked, how's the local economy performing compared to national, you know, we had 76% that said the local is performing much better, or not much better, better. Most say somewhat
Yeah.
better,
Right.
excuse me, okay? But then it's kind of interesting because then we ask, well, what about the sector for your own firm? Well, it's still positive, but not quite as much. So, you know, we just do see differences depending on whether we ask people about, you know, their firm sector, or the economy in general. And I find those interesting.
Yeah.
And we'll be tracking that and trying to explain some of that as we go along.
Yeah, again, a lot of this is ongoing.
Right. What we'd love to do, and it's kind of Patty mentioned it, is we'd love to do a consumer confidence survey, and perhaps, you know, in the next year or two,
It's
we'll
coming
get to
down the
that.
road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the meantime, how can a business owner or business person use this information that we've heard here today? How can it help their business?
Well, I think it gives them an indicator. I mean, certainly that, you know, where the economy is expected to go, and I think it shows that at least it's not expected to get worse, and that, you know, right now, based on historical data, we're not expected to have the downward trend of the national economy. You know, just again, wait to see what happens nationally and if how much longer or deeper the national recession is. But
Okay.
I think it, you know, it can be used by employers to talk about, well, you know, maybe it is time to new investment or hire more people. And
It's going to be good.
yes,
Well, thank you for being here with us today and sharing with us information about the index and the survey. Appreciate the information very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today for the Springfield Business and Economic Review. Again, I'm your host, Sarah Wolin.